Hello, everybody. Oh, it's nice. It's nice to be here today. Hello. I see that you can hear me correctly. So, hello, everybody. I'm Miguel Rojas, cloud architect for the EMEA region for pure storage, basically Portworx and container-related technologies. Before I actually joined the company like 6 months ago, I was working for Red Hat before for 5 years as a solution architect, an expert in OpenShift. And today I actually wanted to follow that theme, which is talking about containers and how to migrate applications between different containers distributions, right? So let's talk about Kubernetes. Everybody's talking about it, right? It went from, oh, this is fashionable, this is a trend, to let's use it in production. I see customers around the world using this technology. I've seen it in Red Hat, and I still see it in Pure Storage, right? So one of the key features, like the key features of Kubernetes is that it's really fast. It's really adapted to cloud native environments, meaning due to Kubernetes, you can jump between clouds. You can build a whole environment in your own cloud, private, hybrid, and public, right? The key attributes, as you can see here, is that it's optimized, as I said, for multi-cloud world, right? So you can move applications around the world in just a tiny container, right? Then it's a pluggable architecture, so easy to swap between key concept and massive scale. So before, what I saw in the industry is that a lot of companies were using virtual machines, right? And they went from virtual machines to containers because, well, it's kind of a natural progress, right? Before, with containers, you basically have to you isolate processes and you use the kernel of the whole operating system. But with virtual machines, you use a whole operating system. It uses a lot of resources, and so companies saw the advantages of using Kubernetes, right? Everything makes sense so far. But when companies try to go to microservices and using containers, applications in containers, they saw that the data of these applications have gravity, right? So these gravity is kind of bringing them down when they try to go from virtual machines maybe to containers. So due to this gravity and these data, so what I learned in my experience in Red Hat is that applications are as relevant as the data that they use, right? It's not the same using bridges images and host these type of images to just use a bank account or store bank accounts on transactions or all the data that's around these new world of production containerized applications, right? So when they try to go from virtual applications to containers, they think that the curve is going to be like this. But then when they see that the stateful applications, so applications that use data, they are as heavy. The containerization is like, oh, it stays linear because it requires a lot of effort, right, to do that. And you have to count with the best tools. So this is kind of what Portworx is trying to cover at the moment, right? So as you can see here, Portworx is going to take care of these data I'm talking about. It's going to basically, because Portworx was born for containers, it's not something that's been adapted to containers, like CSI, for instance. So for those of you that know the Kubernetes world, CSI is basically something that storage providers use to connect with containers. But Portworx was born 6 years ago, and CSI was born 2 years ago. So Portworx was there before CSI, and because Portworx saw the need in containers to basically take care of the data. Cool things about, I'm going to stay here. Cool things about Portworx and the power of Portworx is totally agnostic, right? So when I say agnostic, I mean every cloud. So you can go from Google Cloud or Microsoft Azure or AWS, and Portworx is going to take care of the data, and it's going to build this abstraction layer for all your applications in containers, and it's going to run in any infrastructure. So AWS is going to use any block storage. So obviously, for Pure Storage, it would be great if you use Pure Storage machines, right? But we don't care because you can use NetApp, you can use bare metal, you can use Dell. We don't care because it's totally agnostic, right? It's basically providing that tool that the market is requiring at the moment. And then any Kubernetes distribution, that's what we're going to see today. So you can be using OpenShift, which is great, right? But sometimes it gets complex because it's a very powerful machine. And then you're like, oh, but I want to try Tanzu. So, okay, let's migrate all my applications from OpenShift to Tanzu. Okay? So, and any application, and in every stage. So I see that some customers are starting in this journey to containers, and I see several customers that are, they have huge container environments, like banks, security departments, huge infrastructures with OpenShift, with Tanzu, huge clusters, right? And they have this issue, which is, oh, I have to take care of my data. I need to do backup. So Portworx backup is there for you. It's going to basically grab this namespace that you have in Kubernetes and do a backup. You can create the schedules. It's very powerful. Then you have Portworx DR, disaster recovery. This is one of the things that I see in the EMEA region being more like a worry for companies. So when you have applications in containers in production, you realize that something can happen in production, in a bank, for instance. And did your node or your cluster goes down? What's going to happen? So you have to have maybe an active type of cluster environment. And disaster recovery is key for recovering all. So it's going to take care of the data and the application. So the whole namespace is going to be there if there is something happening in cluster one, right? I don't know, in Slovakia, you have a cluster, and then you have another one in Madrid. And then you have to recover all this data. So Portworx cover also that. And migration, that's what we're going to see today. So you want to migrate the data and the application of that and that application from one cluster to the other, right? And we're going to see in a minute. I'm going to do a short demo of how to migrate the data and the application from cluster 1 to cluster 2. You use in OpenShift, but you want to move to Tanzu, and that's what we're going to see today. I'm going to migrate applications from an OpenShift cluster to a Tanzu cluster. We'll see it in a minute, okay? And then secure, so encryption, and then autopilot. I think this is also really interesting. When I joined the company, I didn't know about this feature. So autopilot is basically you having, I don't know, Black Friday happened recently, right? So with Black Friday, the amount of transaction basically are 10 times more, right, than in a normal day. So when you have a lot of data in that volume, in that application, you need to basically scale up or resize that volume. So autopilot is going to do that for you. If you have, I don't know, 80%, when these volumes at 80%, increase it by 10 gigabytes, right? Or 10 terabytes, whatever is your choice, right? And autopilot is going to do that for you. But today we're going to talk about migration. It's not working? Okay. So data portability between clusters. So imagine that you have, Kubernetes 1. Because Kubernetes distributions are limitless at the moment, but some of the most popular in the market are OpenShift and Tanzu, right? For those of you that know Kubernetes, you know what I'm talking about. So as you can see here, you have the Kubernetes cluster 1 with your applications, and Portworx is taking care of the underlying storage layer. So it's totally agnostic, as I said before, okay? So we're going to just do a snapshot. So it's going to take all the CRDs, so custom resource definitions, like pods, services, volumes, private volumes, everything, right? And we're going to migrate from OpenShift, 3 namespaces, because I think I want to stress it out, right? I want you guys to see live, something that's a real customer case. So we're going to migrate from cluster 1 to cluster 2, and it's going to bring all my applications, right? It's one of the key things. One of the really interesting things about Portworx is that with a couple commands, you can do very powerful things. So I've seen that happening in the market and the need. So it's really like customers really struggle with this at the moment in production because they don't know what tool to use. And Portworx, as I was working in Red Hat for 5 years using OpenShift, right? So I'm kind of biased. So, but still, I see that this tool is very powerful because it's able to do a lot of things in one place. So you can use maybe, I don't know, Velero, right, for backup in production in your Kubernetes environment. But then it's just one thing, just backup. What if you want to do disaster recovery? What if you want to migrate or secure your data? why don't you do that in one place, which is Portworx, instead of just using several tools and using all of these senior time, senior hours, senior engineer type of hours, and you have to spend a lot of time and use a lot of resources, right? With Portworx basically taking that out of the table. So let's see it. Let's see it. I've basically deployed an OpenShift cluster. This is an OpenShift cluster working at the moment. You can see that I have my projects here. I've deployed like 3 key applications. So you see that Postgres, right? I have Postgres here. If I go to my details and workloads, you see my deployment is going to appear here, or my pods. The connection today is not very nice. So for simple things, it might take a little bit longer, but bear with me. We'll see it together. Yeah, as I said, the connection is not great. Yeah. You see the deployment here. If I go to my deployment, you see that there is a pod here running. Everything is running in production, right? So if we go back, and this is just one of the projects that I've created for this demo. Then I've created also a Cassandra demo. Sorry, a Cassandra namespace with, as I said before, my pods, my stateful set are here. But then let's go to the storage, right? Let's see the persistent volumes. So we see that we have Cassandra, we have the Postgres data, and also we have Pet Clinic, which is also an application that I deployed in my OpenShift cluster. So that's what we're gonna do, that we're gonna migrate everything. But let's go to the console. This is my OpenShift cluster, so if I go OC get nodes, you see that I have 3 masters and 3 nodes working in production, and if I go to my Tanzu cluster, which is this one, I'm gonna do the same, kubectl, get nodes, and you can see control plane, everything is running, VMware. So you know I'm not lying, this is a Tanzu environment, right? Let's check these out. Let's see if I'm gonna basically check the same as I was checking in the console. So if I go OC get pods and PVCs of my namespace, Pet Clinic, for instance, okay? Yeah, so we see that my pods are running, and we have the persistent volume. My 3 PVC for my SQL database that I am using in production in this application, okay? So, yeah, I think the audio is way better now. Sorry about that. So what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna show you that Portworx is running. So if I do OC get pods in my namespace, no, kube system. Okay, so these are my pods running in production, my Portworx pods, right? So Portworx basically runs as it's usually in its own namespace. So what is great about this is that you are not kind of integrating a different tool. You are not, oh, I have to install this and create this integration. It's basically Portworx is going to run as pods and services in your own Kubernetes cluster, right? You don't have to go crazy into integrating anything. Once you deploy it, it's going to run as pods, and the service is going to be running for you in your Kubernetes cluster, right? So I see that in my OpenShift cluster, Portworx is running. Let's do the same with Tanzu. kubectl get pods. Great. Same. We see that in my Tanzu environment, Portworx is running. So we're happy. So what I'm going to do now, just for the sake of the demo, I built everything in a YAML environment because, you know, Kubernetes equals YAML, right? So you're editing YAMLs the whole time when you work with Kubernetes. So that's what I did. I created a migration template. So I'm going to show you that. Let me see where I am. There you go. So as you can see here, the type of YAML is a migration, and Stork, which is the open source tool that we use in Portworx to manage data, it's gonna do all the things, all the actions. Basically the mover of data in Portworx, right? So you can see that it's a migration YAML, and the name of it is gonna be OpenShift to Tanzu migration. This migration is gonna be running in the kube system namespace, and cluster pair. This is a kind of a key concept in Portworx. The cluster pair is pretty self-explanatory, right? So you basically provide the credentials. This is a software piece that connects clusters. So it's kind of a handshake between clusters, right? You provide the credentials from cluster 1 to cluster 2, and they see each other. So migrations work, right? It's like a handshake. They see each other, and this is the piece that we use for connecting Kubernetes environments, right? And we're gonna say yes because we want all the resources in the namespace under any namespace that I'm gonna show you now, and start application true. So when I migrate everything, I want my applications to be running when I migrate them, right? And which namespaces do you want to migrate? As I showed you before, I have a Cassandra, a Postgres, and a pet clinic environment. This is what I am telling a store to migrate from cluster 1 in OpenShift to cluster 2 in Tanzu, right? Makes sense so far? Okay, well, let's do it. So let's watch what happens when I do the migration. I basically ask Kubernetes to get me the namespaces and watch it to see what happens when I throw the command, the migration command, right? So let's apply this file, oc apply file migration YAML. Migration created. Let's watch it. Something's happening here. So we can see that OpenShift to migrate to Tanzu. This is the name of the cluster pair. It's called Tanzu, and it's gonna replicate all the volumes. In this case, there are 7, and nothing's happened yet in my Tanzu cluster, right? So basically what's happening is that we take in snapshots of all the namespaces that we chose. It's basically a state of the art of that namespace. So, and also we're grabbing all the CRDs, so services, pods, volumes, everything that is under that namespace that I've specified in my YAML. Portworx is gonna grab it, take a snapshot, and through the cluster pair, it's gonna migrate and start all the applications automatically, because I told it to, right? So let's see what's happening here. Do we see any progress? Not yet, and we don't see that that anything is happening. Apparently, nothing is happening, right? But if you check this, it's elapsed and it's in progress. So something's gonna happen soon, because I mean it's taking a snapshot and it's migrating everything, right? So it's gonna take a little bit of time. So in this time, you guys can even ask me questions if there is any. But so let's actually see what's happening. Oh, it's actually migrated everything. So if I go, oh look, the namespaces are appearing in my cluster too. You see Cassandra, Postgres, and Pet Clinic. They are appearing now, and this is great. Please.
If you put the first snapshot of the first element and you copy it,
Yeah.
and then you do a second snapshot on the second element and then a third, right? The problem is that the copy that you will have on the other side will have the snapshot that is a copy with the delta of time that you have between the snapshots that you take of each element. How do you resynchronize everything?
Sorry, I didn't get it. Can I answer that question after the demo?
Yeah,
so
no
because
problem.
we're running out of time, and I don't want to. I don't want to. I'll answer that question after, because I couldn't hear it very well.
And thank you very much.
Okay. So let's check what's on the. It seems that everything is back in my cluster, but let's check it out. So if I do kubectl get pods and PVCs under the namespace pet clinic. Ooh. Clinic, yeah. Look, I have the same pods and the same volumes running in my cluster. They were not there before. I showed you, right? And in a matter of, I don't know, I can tell you. In 2 minutes, I've migrated 3 namespaces with the data of the application, the pods, the services, everything that was in cluster 1, an OpenShift cluster, to the Tanzu, right? I mean, I we did that in, I don't know, in 2 minutes, and this is one of the features of Portworx, right? And I mean, I'm an OpenShift expert, but I want you guys in my side, so that's what I'm using Tanzu, right? So you saw how simple it was to do this in, I don't know, in a matter of 2 minutes. Obviously, I've created everything beforehand, meaning the class repair, I've installed Portworx. So, but this is not something really hard or really like it's a no-brainer. When you have OpenShift running or Tanzu or any Kubernetes distribution, installing Portworx is fairly easy. You just have to specify the cloud. We actually have a wizard that, because I have time, I'm going to show you. So if you go to PX Central, so Central, you go here and you go, oh, what do you want to install? I want to install Portworx Enterprise. So let's click next. In this case, I'm using the operator and I want the latest version, right? And I want the ETCT to be built in. So if I click next, I choose the cloud I'm going to use. So I go AWS. And what type of volume do you want to provide? Do you want to create volumes for every node, or you have existing disk? In this case, we're going to create, and if I push next, and next because it's auto, and I'm using OpenShift, for instance, and I click finish, I agree, and then it's going to generate, not this one, sorry. Yeah, it's going to generate a spec file for installing Portworx. I mean, because it's an operator, and you have here the operator hub, which is basically a marketplace in OpenShift. This is just an OpenShift demo, like basic, but you can do the same in Tanzu or any environment that uses operators. Once you install it and you give it this spec file that I just showed you, it's gonna do everything for you, and you're gonna have pods, services, and everything running in your Kubernetes environment, right? I think that's it. I'm not using my whole time, right? So I have 5 minutes left. If you guys have any question, I'll be happy to answer those questions after this and with the coffee there. It was really nice to be here. I'll be there to answering questions, okay? That's it. Thank you very much.